Donald Trump's doing a conference with the press, obviously, in Iowa. Jorge Ramos from Univision and Fusion is there, and he wants to ask him questions about the immigration. Now, he's doing what you normally see in the movies. You know, you see in the movies that somebody comes out and the press is like shouting questions at him. Oh, Mr. Trump, how about this? How about that, right? In reality, we have a docile press that never does any of that. They just sit and wait till they're called on, and then they ask a super standard question. If they don't ask a super standard question, Donald Trump will get mad at them. He'll yell at them. He'll call them a baby and a dum-dum, and then he might kick them out of the room. Well, in this case, Jorge Ramos didn't want to wait to be called upon by the boss. He's not his boss. Jorge Ramos is a journalist. He's going to go ask him a question. He starts in immediately when the press conference starts. And what does Donald Trump do? Of course, he kicks him out. Now watch how this goes down.
Okay, who's next? Yeah, please. Excuse me, sit down. You weren't called. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Go ahead. No, you don't. You haven't been called. Go back to Univision. Go ahead.
You cannot deport 11 million.
Go ahead.
You cannot deport 11 million people. You cannot build a 1900 wall. You cannot deny citizenship to children in this.
Sit down, please. You weren't called.
I'm a reporter and don't touch me, sir. Don't touch me.
Go.
You cannot touch me. I have the right to ask a question. I have the right to ask a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, that's Jorge Ramos
Hi,
of
Jim,
Univision.
yes.
He's being escorted.
Damn. So now look, the press that's friendly to the establishment can say he didn't wait his turn. And, you know, Donald Trump's such a good guy, he would have gone all around and he would have finally gotten the Jorge Ramos. But wait a minute. As he said later in a part of the press conference you didn't see, Donald Trump said, oh, yeah, this is Univision. I'm suing them for $500 million. Of course he's going to do this. Well, Donald Trump knows that, and there's an excellent chance that he would have never called on Jorge Ramos because he's from Univision. We know he knows he's from Univision because he said, go back to Univision. He says, sit down. No, wait a minute. You press, are you going to literally take that sitting? Why don't you stand up for yourselves? Why don't other people back him? No. Now, later, I'm going to show you how much the rest of the press not only didn't back Jorge Ramos, they stabbed him in the back. Okay, so let's continue with Donald Trump. Later, when one of the members of the press, and God bless this person, says, hey, wait a minute, now it seems like you kicked out Jorge Ramos, who's a very well-known and respected journalist. Why'd you do that? And listen to Donald Trump's total lie of an answer.
Do you think you handled that situation correctly?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know really much about him. I don't believe I've ever met him, except he started screaming, and I didn't escort him out. You'll have to talk to security, whoever security has escorted him out. But I don't consider that. I mean, somebody walked him out. I don't even know where he is. I don't mind if he comes back, frankly.
That was 3 minutes later. You didn't ask security to escort him. He's like, who was he? I don't know. I guess security did that on their own. Really? Why don't we roll the tape back and see if Donald Trump signaled to security that they should escort him out?
Go back to Univision. Go ahead.
You cannot deport 11 million.
Go ahead.
You cannot deport 11 million people. You cannot build a 1900 wall. You cannot deny citizenship to children in this.
Sit down, please.
Gee, I wonder if Donald Trump looked over to security and then blew him a kiss. What? Apparently this in Trump land means remove him from the premises. Okay. So now, I think the press reaction to this is much more important than what Trump did. Now, what Trump did is deeply troubling. If this guy eventually wins the presidency, which, like, it hurts my heart to even think about, but he is leading very significantly among the Republicans, and the Republicans do stand an excellent chance of winning, you know, the presidency, of course, right? Unfortunately, it is entirely possible right now. And that's how he's going to treat the press. I didn't call on you. Yeah. Out of the building. Gone. The press he doesn't like, removed from the premises. So now Trump says that he had to do it. He said referring to Ramos, he said he stood up and started ranting and raving like a madman, and frankly, he was out of line. That sounds like he's talking about himself. That's exactly what Trump started doing. He stood up on a macro scale and started ranting and raving like a madman, and the Republicans are like, great, we have found our leader. And out of line, Trump Has Trump ever been in line? No, he's out of line consistently, right? That's what makes him popular. He's like, how dare you do the things that I do? Of course not. Ramos isn't doing that. He's asking him legitimate questions. Now, Trump does get something that is true. He says later in a reaction to all of this, most people, in fact, most newspaper reports said I handled it fairly well. He was totally, absolutely out of line. Now, he's not right that Ramos was out of line, but he is right that a lot of the so-called journalists were like, oh, yeah, Donald, you're so right, Donald, yeah. Oh, Ramos, bad guy. Ooh, not polite to dear leaders. Must bow our heads. Ramos didn't bow his head. Well, I'll get to specific quotes on that in a second. First of all, in the MSNBC coverage, I'm not blaming Casey Hunt, who reported on this here, but she did say something curious that will then lead to the broader conversation. She said about this incident, it felt very much like the forced removal of a journalist. No, it didn't feel like that. It was that. That's exactly what it was, the forced removal of a journalist trying to ask a question. So now, she's on MSNBC, and a lot of people might make the mistake of thinking MSNBC is liberal. No. They have a 3-hour block in the morning, Morning Joe, which is deeply conservative. Shockingly, all their panelists, including the woman they brought on from The Blaze that you'll see there, all totally agree. Oh, yeah, Donald's right, Ramos is wrong. Even the resident liberal, Mika Brzezinski's like, oh, Donald, totally, Ramos, how dare he? I'm exaggerating. Watch.
Yeah, but it's a win-win. I mean, look at how much attention Jorge Ramos is getting for this exchange with Donald Trump.
Pretending that he was bullied and pretending that he was thrown out of a room. Did you see?
And
the guy just went like that.
The story. I mean, Jorge Ramos is making himself
the story.
As I was watching his questioning, I was reminded of Larry King listening to a call and saying, all right, caller, do you have a question? Is there a question?
Well, and what
clearly he wanted to bait Donald Trump, and he succeeded.
That's what's so hilarious, Mike. You look at the transcript. No reporter that I know would go to a press conference
to President Obama
to President Obama and deliver a speech.
So you can't do that.
He had a hilarious tweet this morning, Jorge Ramos, where he said reporters ask questions.
No, he didn't.
If he had actually asked a question up front, we wouldn't be talking about him today. And of course, he wouldn't want that. He wants to make it about him.
Casey Hunt had it right. I mean, it had to be awkward and uncomfortable in that room for the rest of the media.
Yeah, but I'm not sure Trump was the one making it awkward and uncomfortable.
No, correct, yes.
And the question that he finally got to was not a very good one, just to be honest.
Well,
just the truth.
He was editorializing the whole time. Write an editorial.
Mika Brzezinski's the liberal. Okay, so first of all, she said he was not thrown out of the room. Did you watch the same video we just watched? I mean, you could have any other opinion you like on it. He was definitely thrown out of the room. See the big goon that came by and grabbed him by the arm and escorted him out of the room? That's what happened. No. Deny reality. You know, Trump is always right. Conservatives are always right. And people trying to actually challenge them are always wrong. So he never even asked the question. That's not true. He asked the question right away. How do you plan to get these 11 million undocumented immigrants out of the country? That's a question. And Mika Brzezinski says, I don't like that question. Why don't you like that? That's the most rational question there ever was, right? I don't like it. Jorge Ramos. Who does he think he is? Why are they so upset about this? You see, it is personal for the rest of the people in the media because they're pretending to be journalists. So when an actual journalist shows up in the room, they get embarrassed. They don't get, and that's what Mike Barnicle was talking about. Oh, it got embarrassing in the room. Everybody's like, yeah, Ramos made everybody embarrassed, right? That's right, because he reminded you, you're not doing your job. You're just sitting there like a lapdog asking him the standard questions. Oh, what do you think about Megyn Kelly? Oh, good. Oh, you said something mean about her. Let's write that down, right? No, ask him tough questions, challenging questions. You're all embarrassed because you never do that. You bow down. Their deference to him, the minute that he rose up in the polls is sickening. It's revolting to look at. So now let's go to a great piece written by Glenn Greenwald at The Intercept, and he points all this out, and he has numerous examples. First, we go to Mark Caputo, who's a political reporter at Politico. Politico's total establishment mouthpiece. Glenn makes a great point about them. They're like, how dare Jorge Ramos not be neutral? He's like, and Glenn asks, Politico, are you neutral? All you do is cater to the advertisers who put, food on your table, right? And the establishment's right, the corporations are right. Oh, look, the defense industry took out a big ad in Politico. The defense industry is, of course, right. Who are you? What are you, neutral? Objective? Please. So we go to Mark Caputo. He says about Ramos, this is bias. taking the news personally, explicitly advocating an agenda. The guy says we should take away birthright citizenship from Americans, and apparently it is not, you're supposed to be like, oh, some say that we should revoke citizenship of people who have citizenship, and others say that we shouldn't. See, what a wonderful reporter I am. Benito says this, and others say that. Well, I don't know what the truth is. Let's see what happens. Mark Caputo continues, Trump can and should be pressed on this. Reporters can do this without being activists. Yeah, really? You guys are doing a great job of pressing him on it so far. And what does that mean to be an activist? He's asking the question, what are you going to do with the 11 million undocumented immigrants? Activist. Funny enough, Ted Cruz agrees with you, which is actually not surprising. Ted Cruz called Megyn Kelly, a liberal media journalist, for daring to ask what he would do with the 11 million undocumented immigrants. Caputo continues, some reporters still try to approach their stories fairly and decently. Yeah, you really want to be decent to Donald Trump. That's your job. And doing so does not prevent good reporting. I would argue that it does. When your top priority is to be decent to the people in power, it does prevent good reporting. He continues, my issues is reporting is imbued with take it personally bias. We fend off phony bias allegations, and Ramos only helps to wrongly justify them. One can ask and report without the bias. I've done it for years and will continue to do so. Okay. Now, Jorge Ramos says, hey, listen, you're going to be taking away people's family members. And for me, it is a little personal because you're going to take away my family members possibly, right? Because we're not just talking about undocumented immigrants anymore. We're taking away rights of citizens, people who are already American citizens. I mean, that could touch anybody, right? It might eliminate, in fact, 2 of the Republican nominees. They might be technically anchor babies under Donald Trump's definition. They'd be removed from the country. So if that affects you, is it okay to say, hey, wait a minute, before you throw me out of the country, even though I'm 100% an American citizen, can I ask you a question about it? Hey, don't take it so personally. He had you removed. Why are you so put somewhere where you couldn't do any harm? What? Why are you being so emotional about this? You should be neutral about it. If the guy takes away all of your rights as an American citizen, he does it for millions of American citizens, you should be neutral about it. This is reporting? This is journalism where you challenge the government? You're a watchdog of the government? You people are a hilarious joke. It's not just Politico. It's not just MSNBC. Here's the Washington Post headline on it. Jorge Ramos is a conflict junkie, just like his latest target, Donald Trump. So Trump wants to remove people from the country, wants to attack people, wants to take away their citizenship. Jorge Ramos asked him a question about it, so they're the same. I mean, you want to talk about the comical level of neutrality that this press advocates for and practices. This is the case for it. So in the text of the article, they do this over and over again, but I'll give you one example. By owning the issue of immigration, Ramos has also blurred the line between journalists and activists. In other words, he actually cares about the news so much, he's an activist. Whereas the rest of us don't give a shit about the news. News? Who cares? You take away people from the country, you take away their citizenship. I don't care. Why did you get into news if you don't care about any of it? It's absurd. By the way, the idea that journalists care about the news and actively pursue challenging the people in power and have a perspective about it is hundreds of years old. It's been going around forever. And Jorge Ramos says it. He says, look, this is personal. He's talking about our parents, our friends, our kids, and our babies. And what is he supposed to be neutral to his own baby? Is that what he's supposed to be neutral to? This is preposterous. And then he explains further, I am a reporter. My job is to ask questions. What's totally out of line is to eject a reporter from a press conference for asking questions, okay? So he's not having a debate with Donald Trump there. He's saying, this is my perspective, but now I need you to answer these questions. The whole country needs you to answer them, and he won't answer them. All he does is evade and bully people. Now, I think Adam Server made a great point at BuzzFeed. He said, objective reporters were openly mocking Trump not that long ago, but Ramos has not reacted to Trump's poll numbers with appropriate deference. Just a reminder that what is considered objective reporting is intimately tied to power or the perception of power. Damn, he nailed it. That right there is the essence of it. Because you remember it too, right? When Trump first came onto the scene, a lot of the reporters were snickering. Oh, Trump, sideshow, he'll never be anything. Donald Trump, yeah, right, clown, whatever. But now that he has accrued some power and he's sitting at the top of those polls and he won't move, all of a sudden, they bow down. Appropriate deference. Oh, Ramos, what are you doing? Bow down, Ramos, bow down. A person in power has told us to sit down. Why aren't you sitting, Jorge? Why aren't you sitting? Man, I don't know that truer words have ever been spoken. That's exactly what this press is about. Now that he has power, we must bow our heads. Glenn then asked the question, Glenn Greenwald does at The Intercept, hey, remember what actually made Walter Cronkite and others legends? And I've said this about Cronkite many times. The two things you remember about Walter Cronkite, everybody does, was when he showed emotion, he cried when JFK was shot, right? And he had an opinion about the Vietnam War. He said, don't believe the government's lies, it is not going well. What would they have done to him today? Now he's a hero and he's a legend. Edward R. Murrow, when he had an opinion, a perspective, and he said, McCarthy is beyond the bounds, right? Those are the legends of news. Now they pretend, no, they were great. They were legends because they never had an opinion. They never had a perspective. That's not true. They're literally rewriting history right in front of your eyes. And about that, Glenn says, does anyone doubt that today's neutrality uber alles journalists would denounce them as activists for inappropriately taking a side? You can't doubt that. Of course they would have. They would have ripped Walter Cronkite to shreds if he came out in modern day, for example, in the middle of the Iraq War and said, Bush is wrong. The Iraq War is not going well. They would have been like, oh, sit down already, Walter. You're making a racket. You're so disrespectful. You're such an activist. You're making it personal. We're supposed to be neutral about the Iraq War. You know for a fact that's what would have happened. Okay. Now, Glenn gets into some great points overall. He says the way that conflict avoiding value is infused into the media outlets that these corporations own is to inculcate their journalists that their primary duty is to avoid offending anyone, especially those who wield power, which above all means never taking a clear position about anything, instead just serving as a mindless, uncritical vessel for quote-unquote both sides. So he's saying, look, don't forget, the people who ultimately own these news stations are giant corporations. Giant corporations don't want to offend anyone because they just want to keep selling, sell, whatever we got, right? And you certainly don't want to offend anyone in power. You might need a license at some point. You might need a merger approved. You might want to take sides on, for example, net neutrality. You don't want to offend the government, okay? Especially those people in power. So the corporate culture is, hey, I'm going to hire people who bow their heads. And more importantly, I'm going to promote people who bow their heads to authority and continue to be neutral to the facts. If you're actually a reporter and you care about the news and you show objectively what the facts are, but you're not neutral to them. You say, hey, Saddam did not have a connection to Al-Qaeda. That's a fact. He did not have a connection to Al-Qaeda. That's objective. The neutral position is some say he did and some say he didn't. Well, corporations love that neutrality, but it is an anathema to real journalism. It's the exact opposite of journalism. All right. So now I think maybe even better point by Glenn here when he says, thus, you do not call torture torture if the U.S. government falsely denies that it is. You do not say that chronic shooting of unarmed black citizens by the police is a major problem since not everyone agrees that it is. And you do not object when a major presidential candidate stokes dangerous nativist resentments while demanding mass deportations of millions of people. These are the strictures that have utterly neutered American journalism, drained it of its vitality and core purpose, and ensured that it does little other than to serve those who wield the greatest power and have the highest interest in preserving the status quo. See, that's what this is about. The status quo must be maintained. And if Jorge Ramos, you did not sit when you were told to sit by power, you are out of line and you must be put back in line. And most of all, you're embarrassing the rest of us. Don't you dare do that, because it shows what utter frauds the rest of us are. And to that last point, Glenn says, as usual, when someone commits a real act of journalism aimed at the most powerful in the U.S., those leading the charge against him are other journalists who so tellingly regard actual journalism as a gauche and irreverent crime against those who wield the greatest power and thus merit the greatest deference. So true, so sad. That's the state of the press in America.